hard-working caps and chaps myself. Chaps and caps.
Are we wearing chaps or are we wearing caps?
You'll never know about the chaps, but you can tell I'm wearing a cap. So it's Tyler. I'm a little
Caps
tired.
for
I just got
Steve.
back. You know, one of the reasons that we had some problems, I had to take off real quick. I don't know if you saw this. I was a surprise witness in the Karen Reed trial back in Boston, so that's why we had to cut it short. I had to leave. So that's one of the reasons that we probably didn't have a full episode last time to talk about RSL and their victory over DC United. I don't know what were one of the reasons that you couldn't be there, Tyler.
I had to go redesign the Grid City kit that we're actually giving away two of the Grid City kits. So keep those answers coming. If you haven't submitted your answer, you have one more week to get it done. We will cut off the contest this weekend, the 28th. If you get your comment in before the 28th, we'll count it. If not, we will not. And if you don't know what we're talking about, go listen to our last episode, figure out why, or guess why. We did not complete the episode. It cut off midway, and we were not able to finish. Guess why? Funniest answer wins. No real answers, I guess. And we're giving away two Grid City kits. So get your answers in, and we'll meet you at the next home game and give it away to you. This kit right here, the one with the grid and the gold and the red stripes on the shoulders. It's a beautiful kit. Beautiful.
Yes, that and so much more tonight. We're going to catch up with DJ David James on our annual catch-up check-in, see what his thoughts are. He's much closer to the team than anybody else, and he has a lot of secrets I'm sure he's going to divulge tonight. So stay tuned and listen. All right, another episode of the RSL Random Fan Podcast. It's a special episode. It's one we look forward to every year. It's our catch-up with our annual chat with David James from the RSL broadcast and so much more. He's on the radio, he's on TV, he's everywhere. He's out in the community. He's doing stuff like Super Bowl for Caring, right? We've never talked about that, but you are responsible for bringing that to our community. So just an amazing guy. I'm your host, Brad Goebel, joined by Tyler Thomas and the amazing David DJ James. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, we love to chat with you. We like to get caught up on your thoughts midway through the season. Your thoughts so far. What are your thoughts so far? Let's just start there.
I have so many thoughts. Yes. Sit back, guys. Here we go. A 3-hour tour around my brain. All right.
Well, maybe I'll be more specific. What has been the most surprising thing for you this season?
I suppose how bad they've been. I guess bottom line, they have been picked low in the preseason before, and Pablo has always found a way to push buttons and get them far beyond what anyone expected. And that has not happened so far this year. And it just, my dad used to have a sign. He was a high school teacher. And he had all the bitterness that you think might have gone with being a high school teacher. And he had a sign, and it said, "We, the understaffed, have done so much for so long with so little. We will now try the impossible, and we will do everything with nothing." And I think someone should hang that on Pablo's door when he's not looking. I just think the roster isn't good enough, especially at the top end of the roster. I think when it comes to star power, the elite, I think I was telling Pablo this the other day. I said soccer has so much in common with basketball, right? And it's just, and one thing is when you ask somebody to be the best player on the team when really they ought to be the seventh best player on the team. You know, a long time ago, if you're an old NBA head, there was a guy named Wayman Tisdale, went to Oklahoma, played in Sacramento when I was there. People were like, Wayman's not good enough, Wayman sucks, blah, blah, blah. And Jerry Reynolds, the GM at the time, would say off camera, because he didn't want to embarrass Wayman, he says, Wayman, if he were on a team where he was the third best player, people would think he's awesome. But because we're not winning enough, because he don't have any help, and we're asking him to be the best player, people think he sucks. He's like, he's Wayman. He's pretty good. He's better than most NBA players, but he's not as good as the top 30 or 40 NBA players. I think that's what they're seeing with the Jazz, with RSL. We've seen it with the Jazz over time. I think that they desperately miss a nine. I mean, just desperately, right? And I think Diego Luna, who's having a great year, would be even better. His assist stat was he makes passes and they don't get finished. If he was passing the ball to someone who could finish the way Chicho was finishing last year, Gomez awed us all, right? We were all super impressed. 13 goals, 9 assists. Well, somebody's got to finish the 9 assists. In an honest moment, I think people would say Chicho's gravity opened up and gave opportunity for Andres to score the 13 goals, right? If Chicho checks back the ball and plays like a false nine on any one given possession, are the center backs going to step with him? Yes, they are. Is Andres going to get in behind? Yes, he is, And so everything impacts something else. And I think, they'd be well served by that. Diogo, it just hasn't worked. It hasn't clicked. For a DP, they expect more, they need more. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened. And I think when it comes to his stats, he's got to score more goals. The assists would be better if he had Chicho. I mean, he got here right when Chicho couldn't finish. Couldn't finish anything for anybody in any situation. He just disappeared into games. So I would say there at the top end of the roster, I think they still have a lot of good MLS players, but they need the star power and they need to score goals. And they've been freakishly unlucky. I think they could have won in Nashville. I don't know why that wasn't a red card right in front of the fourth official. And, if you're up a goal and up a man, you've got a great shot at 3 points. And I think, well, that's another thing. So what else am I disappointed in? I am disappointed that Cabral has played this well and the stats are this bad. That poor guy has faced so many penalties. He's made so many big saves. I think his distribution's been good. I just hear over and over about his leadership. We don't get to be in the locker room, so we'll just take that at face value, but I don't hear anything to contradict it. So, he's given up a lot of goals, but man, some of the situations he's found himself in, he just, good teams shouldn't be in that situation. But from people inside the organization and people outside, a lot of them think the defensive problems at the root are they're pressing and they feel like they have to be perfect. They can't play loose because they know if they give up a goal, they'll probably lose, and if they give up 2, they will. Whereas last year they're winning games 5-2, and they made the same mistakes, and nobody thought anything about it, and they played with confidence and they played aggressively, and didn't worry about it because you're probably going to score 5 goals anyway. So I do know there was one time when now former owner Ryan Smith came to a game last year, and he saw Pablo afterwards, and Pablo said, "Hey, how's it going?" Just kind of the standard greeting. Ryan's like, "Great. Every time I come to one of your games, you score 5 goals." Pablo's like, "Well, you ought to come to more games then, So let's go." And they had a bunch of those games, and they just don't have that this year. And then everybody feels beaten down, and people press. And I had Heath Pierce on the Thursday night show last week, and he thought, he loves McAnally, and he loves Diego Luna. But if they had a couple DPs were playing at a high level, he said those guys would be even better because they wouldn't feel pressure to carry the club in a way that, maybe, a Mech in his 3rd year in MLS just shouldn't be asked. And Diego is, hard to believe Diego's still young,
Yeah.
He's mature and he's older. He plays older than his years, but nonetheless, it's not like he's a 28-year-old guy who's been through a lot of stuff. He hasn't.
Yeah, he's not even 22 yet.
I guess those are the major disappointments, I don't worry. I'm not that depressed about the long term. I know a lot of people are, and maybe I'll prove to be the fool. Who knows? None of us knows what the future holds. But I really think that this front office and this coach and this core of players has done well when they've either been left alone or they've had the full support of ownership. But in one way or another, when they haven't had the full support, bad stuff has happened. The best playoff run they had while they were owned by the league. And let's not kid ourselves, the league didn't care. Here's your budget, go play soccer, whatever. We got other stuff to do. And what they do, they ended up in the Western Conference Final. And there was some bad stuff going on that year, The sales come in, guys are going to be out of contract, they don't know their future. And Pablo's message yet was, welcome to the club, man. I'm an assistant coach who just got promoted. I don't have a contract either, but the best way to get a job is to be good in the one you're in. So let's be good. And they ended in the Western Conference Finals. And then I thought last year, it's fun to bang on owners. Let's not kid ourselves. It's fun, right? But man, ownership last year, they went out and the 2 most expensive transfers a club has ever made, and they brought in guys, and the front office identified the right guys, and the coaches, had a game model that worked for those guys. that was the most points they ever had in a season, and that was the most goals they've ever scored in a season. You know, now there've been other times where, if the owner plays kick the can down the road with, hey, we're one transfer window away from what could be a big transfer window, now the team starts struggling, right? And if there's battles with star players behind the scenes and they ultimately walk away, that's not so good. So the Millers have come in and said all the right things, and they were a picture of stability running the Jazz. And I really think this organization needs stability. I mean, the cold hard fact, since 2013, when they went to the MLS Cup final and Jason Christ left, I don't know, I think the Monday after the final, I think he was gone. Maybe it was a Tuesday, but he was gone in short order. Since then, they basically changed the coach, the GM, or the owner once every year. One of those three. I mean, you can just go through it with the multiple owners, 3 different owners, counting four if you count the league owning the team.
Right.
And they've gone through the GMs. It's been 4 different GMs now. And they've gone through the coaches. And I'm afraid to count all the coaches. Christ to Petke to Kassar to Freddie so 5 now, 4 more after Jason walked out the door. So that's 12 changes in 12 years, and they need some stability. And that is the way the Millers ran the Jazz. Jerry Sloan coached forever, and they fired one coach in 30 years.
Tyrone Corbin?
Ty Corbin, yeah. And then the GMs, I mean, it's like everybody did a decade. Kevin O'Connor went off into retirement. Scott Layden took a big money offer with the Knicks. Frank walked into retirement, so they had changed there. But, they went a decade with the GM. That's a pretty good run. And they were the only owners, so there's way more stability there. And I think they benefit from having a long-term plan, stability. I know there are things the Millers can't possibly know about soccer, and they'll learn a lot of them the first 6 months, and they'll learn more in a couple of years. And at 5 and 10 years, there'll probably be other things because the league will be changing and evolving. So there'll always be something to learn. I don't think they can have the kind of stability that they had on the court in soccer. I think soccer today resembles more the NBA today. The contracts are so short. It's 3 years. Players have power. And so when I hear we're not going to sell our players, what I think that means is we don't want to sell our players. We want to grow them, and we want people to have another generation of someone like Ramondo and someone like Beckerman. But you look at games today, and, the 16-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid who's coming to a game today, Beckerman and Ramondo, those are their dad's players, Those are their mom's players. Those are not their players, right? So they need someone for their generation, and can Diego Luna be that person? But I think the thing and maybe they know this and maybe they don't, I don't know, it's too young, it's too early on to tell this, but soccer players have a lot of power. And I don't think hockey players and baseball players have the same kind of power because they sign such long contracts. And football players don't have that much power because they don't have guaranteed contracts. But when you have 3-year guaranteed contracts and you can move, you have a lot of power. I think that's what we see in basketball and soccer. And so if Andres Gomez wants to go, well, you can say that you want to have stability, but you have to sell Andres Gomez. You have to sell him because otherwise you risk losing him on a free transfer and you just can't walk away from that kind of money. And you can't lie to him about what the market is because his agent knows. His agent's talking to clubs in Europe. So if there's 1 club or 3 clubs or 6 clubs or whatever, agents know. And so the players know. So
Well, and that's the difference too, right? Because there's competing leagues in soccer.
Oh, yeah.
Like in the NBA, you want to play in the NBA. You don't want to go to Spain. You don't want to go to Greece. Even
Right.
though you might do fine, you want to be in the NBA, and it's not the same in MLS.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing is that there's so many leagues. So there are leagues that people can go to for more money, which is what we most commonly see. But there's also leagues you can go to if you need to play closer to home. There's leagues you can go to if you want more playing time, even if it means a little less money. So there can be lots of motivations. I mean, the motivation usually is go to a bigger league and make more money. But
Or you could
it's
just
all out.
extend your career, right?
Yeah.
Like Saba Rios, he went back to Costa Rica and played till he was
Yep.
67 or something. It seemed
Yeah.
like just kept playing.
67. I do think we had Pablo on the radio show with PK, and he talked about, because I talked about that concept in him. I'm like, hey, okay, that's as a general philosophy, hey, we want to grow our stars, we want guys to be here a long time and be really good. Well, no one can really argue with that, right? I said, but it doesn't work that way. And Pablo said, yeah, but maybe in your 11 starters, you have a core of 7 guys and then you got maybe 4 people who are swapping out, right? Maybe you brought in a couple from overseas, but maybe you bring in an MLS veteran because you have a need, because you lost somebody or somebody had a season-ending injury. He said, if you had 2/3 of a core and some fresh blood, Pablo's big on that. And I mean, we've heard that from other coaches too. Create competition, get someone in there that gives you a slightly different look, different energy. You don't want a team to grow stale. You always have some turnover, but just not so much.
Okay, let's not talk about, before we get too far away, front office coaching. The Pablo Mastroeni is last year of his contract, and just kind of reading between the lines, listening to Kurt Schmidt talk earlier the year, there RSL the last 4 seasons he pointed out has faded at the end of the year.
Uh-huh.
So was the start of the year, is there the front office, the new general manager, Kurt Schmidt, looking for a reason to find his guy? And are they forcing Pablo maybe to prove himself, to extend his contract? Because have you heard anything about the
I've, I've,
those two?
I was stunned to hear from someone who doesn't usually steer me wrong that the Millers are going to hang with everybody and give everyone contract extensions, both with RSL and the Royals. And when you think how things are going for the Royals right now, that's a little surprising. But
Yeah,
that's what
they're in
everybody,
last place.
I think that goes back to stability. I think that goes back to, okay, let's see what we've got. Maybe, and I have heard this, and I've worked for a couple of people who believe this. Like, there are people who want to come in and get their own people immediately. But there are people who are also like, hey, change is bad, and there may be problems, but are they fixable? Does everyone want to be on board and fix them? And so if you get on board with the vision, you can stay. And, I think they realize that sometimes people who are in middle management have their hands tied, and if you're not the owner, you're in middle management.
Yeah,
Unless you have the absentee owner who gives all power, to a president or whatever, and then says, "Hey, do whatever."
at,
But you get
at the
down
start of
to making player decisions, and so let's find out. If you were turned loose, what would you do? And then if somebody lays out a good vision, well, maybe you need to, sign on for that. I mean, realistically, that's what Pablo did to get the job as the intern. He laid out a vision. The team executed the vision in the short run, so the club signed him to, do it in the long run.
yeah,
So I think that's an excellent question: is why have they faded down the stretch? What has happened? Now, there's been some. I think there's a lot of factors, a lot of possibilities there. One, have they been deep enough, and have they played some really important players too many big minutes? Two, do they not have a star-laden roster, which they largely haven't had? And do they have a lot of depth? And are they peaking? Are they peaking because they're playing twice a week? And everybody's competing for playing time that they know is there. And it creates a whole energy and vibe. When you get down to 1 game a week, now you got 10 guys who were playing kind of, hanging their head like, I'm not playing. And they're trying to be good teammates, but they know they're not playing. And so have they really been built, if you look at the better teams in the league, have they been built with great depth, or have they been built with most of the money invested in the starting 11? Well, I mean, what about Seattle? What about LAFC? Are those teams 20 deep?
they're probably not, but
Right,
But they're 15 maybe, 15 deep.
right. But RSL's strength has been being 20 deep, throwing guys at you, running into the ground when everybody's playing twice a week. So maybe there's a little bit of fool's gold, and you're capitalizing on a specific stretch of the schedule because they are always good at the same time. They're not good at the start when they play once a week. They never get off to great starts. But man, you get into April, May, June, where typically they're U.S. Open Cup games, they're midweek games, they crush it. And I do think these last couple seasons have been weird, and they're changing the format this year. But this whole stoppage for the League's Cup, I don't like
yeah, it
it.
hasn't been good.
I don't like it. Man, if you get knocked out and you're sitting around and you don't play for 3 weeks, that's horrific. Now they changed the format, stop the league for group play, and then knockout play goes on Wednesdays and the league resumes on the weekend. Yeah, maybe that's a better look.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
personally,
like that a lot better.
I don't get the League's Cup, but I get they're creating content that they can market and make money off of. People say it's a cash grab, and I say, well, it's a business. We don't have to like it.
And one of the things too with Pablo, and I don't watch other teams practice, but it's always been Pablo expects his guys to play harder in practice than they do in the game almost. And does that, by the end of the season, has he just rode these guys into the ground? There was a couple of players they'll come to me, but like he just rode them into the ground, and by the end of the season, his main guys were tired. And that, I don't know if that
Yeah,
how the other teams approach that, or if that's just a fan
yeah. I
being a
think you
fan.
have to take it on a year by year and case by case basis. Why did they fade last year? Well, they didn't have Andres Gomez going for 13 goals and 9 assists, and Chicho's decision making and off the field problems caught up with him. He was suspended. His off field life was sapping a lot of energy, and he just wasn't the same player. So I think that's why last year fell apart. Now, a couple years ago, do I think Emeka and Nelly ran down late in the season? I do. Okay, so what can you do about that? Well, he was a rookie. He played a full college season and stepped right into a full pro season, and he'd never ever experienced that before. I'm not surprised, he wore down. I thought he handled it a little better at the end of last season. Um, now this year he's not going to wear down. This year's a different deal with him having a major injury and being shut down in the middle of the season. It'll be more about him recapturing his form, I don't think. So some of these years are a one-off, and you got to look at each individual problem.
Now,
Yeah.
at the start of the season, sorry, I gotta jump in here, Tyler. But the start of the season, if you were to guess who had the upper hand, if there is an upper hand, seemed like Kurt Schmidt looked like he had the upper hand with all the things being that went well. But it seems like it's kind of flipped or it's come back to kind of equal between the two. If there is, this is just looking from the outside in, like I mentioned. But it seemed like what has happened this year is kind of maybe uh, knocked a little bloom off the rose there for what he did the last couple of seasons.
I think that there's a third elephant in the room here, just to mix our metaphors and keep everybody on their toes. And that is that I thought Kurt was in a fight over the winter with one hand behind his back. And when I heard what the plan was in November, I was talking to one of the PR guys, and he was just like, "Well, that sucks. That's the plan, to bring in some. Well, we might bring somebody in at the end of the window, and we might but it might be summer before it brings people in." At that point, I didn't know about the sale, right? I'm like, wait a minute, no. The most relevant and the most important this club ever was in the market, aka the most opportunity this club had to make money because it is a business, was when they were in Champions Cup. I mean, it was Champions League at that point, and they get to the final against Monterrey, and people who couldn't name 10 players on the team, were suddenly way into it. Like, are they really going to beat? I mean, they start beating teams from Costa Rica and Mexico, and if you remember, they had Cruz Azul in their group, right? Played an epic game down in Mexico in a
In
driving
the monsoon,
rainstorm.
yeah.
Yeah, beat them up here. He has a monsoon, right? And so it was the kind of stuff like, man, it kind of catches your eye. And so now they're going to Champions Cup, and I mean, they were running 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds out there. You're just not going to go very far. Now, it turned out they didn't go anywhere at all. I didn't know it was going to be that short a run. Nor did I know the Galaxy were going to have the problems they did. I looked at the seeding and thought, oh, they'll play the first two legs, they'll advance, and then, And it turned out with the Galaxy issues, man, they had a bracket set up. But like, they didn't have goal scorers. And asking these 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids to carry the load, it's like, it's no wonder the season has gone well. I mean, we can all see the promise in Gozo, but he hasn't finished enough chances. But it's not surprising. He looks like he's rushing in front of goal. Well, a teenager has an adrenaline rush because he's about to score. I mean, just actually the last goal he scored in the last game, that was one of the first times, I think to all of us, it looked like, well, he slowed down a little bit. He calmed down a little bit, right?
Yeah, he was 6 feet. He was 6 steps ahead. By that point, he had time to slow
Yeah,
down a
right,
little bit.
exactly. And we've seen this coaching staff take a young player, and the production isn't there, the production isn't there, but they keep preaching the same lessons, and then it clicks and it works. So, let's give it a little time. But he's not working alongside, an elite striker.
Yeah.
Um, I think to your question about the front office, if you want to ask why Diogo doesn't work, okay, that's a good question. Because as a DP, it should be working better, So that's a problem. With Dom, it's a little bit of a problem. I think I view that one as kind of a C minus D plus right now. It still feels like it could work. He's still way on the young side, and he hasn't played with a quality striker. If they bring in a quality striker and he starts racking up assists because he crosses a lot of balls in, and some of them just go all the way through the top of the 6-yard box and out the other side, if somebody starts banging those into the back of the net, now he has more confidence. Now maybe he mixes in a goal or two too. It's not going great, but I'm not willing to give up on it either. I really don't know what to make of that one right now. I think Agata was a short-term desperation move, but I think the defining thing of the offseason wasn't the coach and it wasn't the front office. I think it was the sale. I think it's an old story that if you're going to sell a business, you try to maximize the income and minimize the expenses, and the difference between the two times 7 is probably where the sale price is going to land. It's an old business equation, right? And I mean, these sports owners are all gazillionaires, man. They all know how the game is played. So look what happened. All the expensive guys went away. Nobody came in. They ran a bunch of teenagers out there who don't make much money. This wasn't the offseason where they set records for transfers. So, I mean, I just don't think this team is set up to win. And it's just so many young guys. I mean, Diego Luna is way young, but he's talented. He gets most of the credit. The coaching staff's brought him along. And I got to give it to the front office for finding him in the USL. Man, San Jose had him in their academy and couldn't figure it out. What are you doing? I think the decision to sell Barajas, if they're going to keep bringing in these young guys, you've got to allow a runway of 2, 3, 4 years for them to really develop and take off. Exactly. So Barajas goes into the pipeline, but then boom, he's out. And after 2 years, well, really after a year and a half, you're selling a guy with 13 goals and 9 assists. Like, do they get to stay here and kind of have the fruits of the labor show up and the wins or the first sign of success? And I just don't think they controlled the timeline with Gomez. And they didn't control the timeline with Diego. In that regard, it's kind of bad luck. But when you look at the 8 attacking positions, I had a friend tell me this. I don't know if I should use this analogy or not. Let's use it with that. Okay. So he's in sports radio. And this is probably 2005, I would say. Maybe a little later, but not past 2007 because I know where I was working. And they're talking about, hey, the ratings are good, but the sales aren't there. Management might make a rash decision because, of course, the bottom line is the bottom line. And he said, you can't get too mad at the people because look how the system is set up. Sports radio pays what it pays, and you usually have 2 people who are really good who are crushing it, and you have 2 people who are kind of getting it, kind of not. They're pretty good, and you have 2 people who just don't get it. They're just not good, and they're not doing anything, right? And he said, now right about the time that someone in that middle group really starts to figure it out and excel, you know what happens? One of your top 2 jumps and takes more money in TV, or jumps to a managerial job at another station in town, or something like that, and now you're back to 2. And like one of the beginners gets into like their 3rd year and they're really figuring it out and they move up, but now you got to bring in somebody at the bottom again and you're back to 2, 2, and 2. And I think that they need to keep that in mind, and it's easier for me to say it than it is to do it for sure. But if you're going to have 8 attacking players and you're going to have a deep team and you're going to be trying to play multiple competitions at once, right? This is a league that looks like it's going to have 3 competitions in addition to the Major League regular season. So you need guys who are in all these phases, guys who are super productive. People are figuring it out and are almost there, but they're not there yet, like Diego Luna last year. He didn't have a bad year last year, a good year, but he didn't have a great year. And now he's having a great year, right? So who's stepping in behind and having a good year now and filling in behind Diego in the pipeline? Because Luna seems to be stepping in where Andres Gomez was. And I think it's up to ownership to bring in somebody like Chicho and spend that money. Agata, I mean, he's in for Anderson Julio. And why was Anderson Julio moved? He didn't want out. He didn't. No. I think the ownership demanded it. I don't think that's Kurt saying, "Oh yeah, look at this guy, get rid of him." I'm sick of this guy running behind and scoring goals. I'm sick of this one-man press, destroying center backs, taking the ball, walking in on the keeper, beating him all by himself.
Scored from midfield.
What just happened? Yeah. How did we score? How'd that happen? Because he just conjures it up out of thin air. And you're busy, running down the flank, tracking some guy, thinking the ball's going to be banged over your head here in any moment. And meanwhile, Anderson's back there putting the ball in the back of the net. And I think God is more an Anderson Julio type acquisition. But again, that's where you don't have the star power at the top, so you're asking somebody to do more than you really should be asking them to do. They need a 15-goal scorer, and I don't know anybody who thinks Agata is a 15-goal scorer.
Agata
Yeah,
does. He's
Yeah,
and
maybe.
maybe
Looking
he'll
at my
get
head,
there.
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tyler.
no, I was going to say, let alone Piol, right, or any of the other guys down the roster a little further, right? It's kind of
Piol
like,
was asked to start, and Piol should be the third guy learning the game. He's at the very beginning of the journey.
yeah,
He's super young, and he just came here, from another continent. I mean, what,
not
look
even
at
really a
Oklahoma, his
soccer
first
nation.
year. Same thing. He was super young. He came from
Yeah,
another continent.
yeah, and Piol, I mean, Piol, he was like, one of the things he said when we interviewed him, he said, "Yeah, I can't believe the stadiums are as full as they are here in the States." Because in Australia, there was hardly anybody there watching. You know what I
Right.
mean? So,
So,
not
but
really
they,
a soccer nation.
but when they're starting him and Marchuk and Diego Luna, I mean, that's
And
crazy how
Goza.
young that trio is. Gonzalez is the only veteran. You're starting three kids and one vet, and the vet's struggling, and then you wonder why the team is struggling. Now Diego, to his credit, is out punching his weight here and just crushing it this year. And now it's Gozo for Marchuk, but again, it's still crazy young. Agata gives him a little bit of maturity. It's just super young.
Yeah, and on that same note, as we get into more of the age where these guys have kind of hit their stride, they say that this is something we've talked about here on the podcast quite a bit, is the guys peak in soccer right around that 25, 26 age group. And we don't have a ton of guys on our team
Boom.
that hit that.
Totally agree. Totally agree. But if you're cutting payroll, guess who's expensive and guess who's not? You got two older guys on the team, and they both came in on free transfers. Now, to the credit, again, Pablo trying to just and the front office trying to identify somebody who can give him something. Cabral's a free transfer. I think he's played pretty well. I know the stats aren't great. I know they aren't. But I
But he's
think
played well.
that's because of what's happened in front of him,
Yeah.
And I think Johnny Russell, he didn't have a camp. He didn't play. And they've been saying he's getting better. And now in the last game, it looked like he's better, right? So,
Well, and then there's
I went
those
to
two 25-year-olds, and then there's a gap. And the next three
yeah.
guys are all 28: Junka, Diogo, and Justin Glad.
Yep.
Those are the three old guys on the team.
Yeah.
And then Steiduhar, which again, he's a keeper, so not
He's
really
not playing.
there.
Yeah.
Right. And then Katranis, right?
Yeah.
So 27.
How old is Agata now? Agata's got to fit in there somewhere, doesn't he?
Yeah, where's he at there? He's 25, almost 26.
Yeah. So by bringing in Agata and Russell, they beefed it up. But a long time ago, Pat Riley was talking about young guys when the Lakers were really good, and he was there, and I was young and living in Southern California. And he said, we need our roster to be one-third old guys, one-third guys in their prime, and one-third young guys. The young guys are how your team improves. The guys in their prime carry the freight night in and night out and get it done. Game after dreary, after exhausting game after game, they just keep bringing it because they're in their prime and they can do it. He says the veterans can't do it. It's too big a grind. But the veterans are there for a couple reasons. Big moments, they've been there and they can deliver. And when things are going really bad, and they can stand up and say, guys, I've been here before. This is how we get out of this. So that's what you need your veterans for. I think that, honestly, I just think that applies to most team sports. I don't care if it's MLS or EPL or the NFL or Major League Baseball. It doesn't matter. I just think as group dynamics go, that's what you need. And this team skewed really young. Some of the guys we think of veterans, are still on the young side. Brian Vera's a hothead sometimes, and sometimes he's immature. Well, okay. Look how old he is. Look at the ages he's been playing at that we've been watching him at America First Field. Okay, he's on the young side. I think Ojeda plays older than his years. He's on the young side. Amekanelli's interesting because he's getting into the prime age group, but he hasn't been in MLS that long, and he's already changed positions. You know, I mean, I think it's amazing he's come as far as he has. I think that's another win that the front office ought to claim when someone, starts bagging on their decision making. Like, how many guys are they supposed to find, on free transfers and in a college draft? That's not
Yeah,
normally where you look.
they've done
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah,
They give
and
me a hard time.
recycling guys like Caliscan who get cut, and then the coaches play him at one position. He looks pretty good, but they have too many bodies, and then out of necessity they switch him, and man, he's really claimed that right back job.
Yeah, he took over for Javane Brown, who, same thing, right? Same thing, got recycled in MLS and has
And
played pretty well for us, but he's out right now.
He's hurt.
he's
Yeah.
yeah, he's done for the season. I think looking at the season, they give me a hard time. I love Cabral, absolutely love him, and I think it's Cabral. If it wasn't for Cabral, this team would have 2 wins, 1 win maybe, and maybe it would just be totally bonkers, totally terrible. But I think it's Cabral, Luna, and the emergence of Gozo. I think those 3 players are the reason it feels like the team hasn't totally just spun out and blown apart.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue. I think those two guys are having great years, and Gozo has come in and made a splash and showed a lot of promise. It is a really small sample size with him. It'll be real interesting. I think that the good thing about finding him is that on the shopping list of things that they want and they need to acquire, they're like they don't need anyone there. What they need is someone to take. As long as Marchuk is here, they basically have the second player for that position. And so do you have 2 players at every position, or do you have 4 for 2? Because injuries are going to happen, fatigue is going to happen, red cards are going to happen, and you still need guys who come off the bench and play at a pretty high level. You know,
Yeah,
so
and
I
that's
mean,
kind of happened with
they
Anelli as
really
well, right?
skated by. I mean, if you want to look for a mistake that they got away with, they didn't have anybody behind Catranis last year. And if he'd gotten hurt, I mean, I guess you throw Brody in there. Um, Brody can do the running, the physical play at right back, the way they're playing. That's because he just has a slighter frame, so that was a big ask for him. So maybe you go there, but man, they really rode Catranis hard. And so bringing in Junqua, they got a second guy at that position. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, we've gone on and on about the right back position has just been comical for Real Salt Lake to get last couple of seasons, and I was actually kind of lamenting the fact that maybe we could have kept Brody and just put him at right back until Caliscan came along and made that his position so far. So yeah,
yep.
kudos for Brody, but yeah, that right back position is just uh, I don't understand it.
Brutal.
I think that the emergence of some of these guys has really, in my mind, they need a 9 and they need a 10 or a combination winger 10. I mean, the way they play, sometimes you're on the wing, sometimes you tuck inside the way Diego did last year and the way Diogo does. And now Diego's just parked in the middle, in the middle or over in the right channel. He's kind of got the freedom to go wherever he needs to, really, in the attack. And so those are the two things. And if they get those two things, then you can try to shore up the depth with less expensive guys. You always have to be good at that. You have to be good at the recycle guys. It's somebody underappreciated. You have to be good at the college draft picks. You have to be good at the free transfers because it is a salary cap league and you can't pay everybody. You know, So, but what do? You do DPs, and I don't know. Are they still doing the young DP thing? Are they going away from that? The salary cap rules are so. I wish they'd simplify them, and I wish the
Yeah.
average fan could just follow them. But there's exceptions to the exceptions, and it gets pretty convoluted.
Well, and even the international, we have 16 internationals on our roster, which is funny because I think the rule says 10 or something like that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but then you get the green card and you're okay, and you don't count, right?
right. So
There's always,
Ruiz
like you said,
doesn't
there's always
count.
an exception to the rule, and that's why Ojeda missed the last game, is he was away, taking care of that. But you got to go to your home country and sit wherever you're from,
Right.
and it takes as long as it takes, and you're dealing with two government bureaucracies, and don't get anybody in the front office started on that, man. That's one time when all all 30 MLS teams come together and just, I don't know, maybe San Diego's too new, so maybe they haven't. But the other 29 teams come together like, I've got horror stories. Well, back off, I've got horror stories. It's just.
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell us about Boa Vista? Right?
Right.
Why didn't you tell us about Boa Vista?
There's another horror story for us, right?
So, let's see. Talk about where do you see the team going through the season? Is there enough here to make the playoffs? We've got 6 of the next 8 games or something like that at home. By the end of July, I think the season is either starting or over, probably. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I wonder even more than that. They've got, I think there's, I don't know how it's going to play out this summer. I think the best case scenario is that they have somebody in the next week, and that player then has 3 weeks to train with the team and get ready. So when the window opens and they can start playing, they're up and running, and they've gone through this period that Johnny Russell went through and a period that Chicho needed, right? You can't just come in, add water, and stir and think you're going to get a good cookie out of that, right? You get what you get if that's how it goes. Now, if they do bring in 2 players, and if they are high end and they do juice up the attack and it comes together, you do the points per game. Getting to the playoffs is doable, but it's a pretty big ask, and getting to 7, it's doable, but it's a big ask. And I just think before we get to the window opens when these players can play, if they get signed, if they drop, their next 2 games are against 2 teams that they ought to win if they're going to be a playoff team, right? Kansas City, they've played better in stretches here, but they're not good. You need 3 points on the road, So are they going to get 6 points in these next 2 games or not? Because is it St. Louis after Kansas City? Is it St. Louis?
Yes.
Yep.
St. Louis and then Houston even, and Houston's not playing great this year either.
Right.
And those are both.
Do you get 6, 7, or 9 points out of that, and do you get back in the mix and give yourself a chance? It's a stretch of 4 or 5 games here, and they got 3 the last time, but not getting anything in that Galaxy game. That was an opportunity lost. Everybody else in the league almost everybody's beating those guys, and everybody's getting at least 1 point, and you got 0. So you lost ground to the entire Western Conference with that one. But you can't go backwards. So no point crying over it. You just got to go 3 in Kansas City, and then you got to beat St. Louis and get 3, and then maybe you got a little momentum and you're playing with more confidence against Houston. But they've really squandered it. I also think, though, and the Millers haven't really said anything about this, but I don't think the playoffs needs to be the goal for this team. Not the ultimate goal. This is. I find that soccer has the most in common with college sports, to be honest with you. And you look in college football and college basketball, teams check multiple boxes, right? A football team wants to get bowl eligible. A football team wants to get to the conference title game. Then they want to win the conference title. Then they want to get to the playoffs. Then they want to, and you have all these bars along the way, and only one team can win it all. But depending on what the expectations are for you and how many boxes you check along the way, it could be a really good year. BYU went 11-2. They didn't get to the conference title game, but they checked enough boxes along the way. Beat your rival, right? Get to double digits in wins, and so get nationally ranked. And so they check these boxes. I think for Major League Soccer, you want to win the MLS Cup, but you look at a decade. Like if you have a great decade, you win 2 or 3 MLS Cups. Seattle's been great. The Galaxy have been great, but who wins 5 cups in 10 years? Nobody does that, right? And it's the salary cap. It's a parity-driven league. So you want those, but you can't do it every year. But the problem with the playoffs is the way things are set up now, and Wade and MLS will change the playoff format every 2 or 3 years anyway. But 18 of the 30 teams go to the playoffs. So getting in the playoffs, you're in the top 60%. Now you don't want to be in the bottom 40, so that's a box to check. But it's not enough. You need more. You need to check that box and then move on. You can check being bowl eligible in college football, but then you need to move on and accomplish more. And to me, this new format they have for the Champions Cup, there's going to be, depending on the year, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams making it from Major League Soccer. Basically, it's going to be a quarter to a third of the league. Because with the League's Cup, those berths might go to MLS teams and they might go to teams from Mexico. But if you're in the Champions Cup and you're in the top quarter to third of the league, then you're a pretty good team. You've had a pretty good year. Maybe you won the MLS Cup. Maybe you got there. Maybe you didn't. but then you start the next season with big matches that can get the fan base fired up. So to me, that needs to be a goal that they set and that they reach more often than not. And,
And
and
that,
given the fact that everybody's missed the playoffs, including the Galaxy, including LFC, including Seattle, you're not going to qualify 10 out of 10 for Champions Cup in a decade, but you're there 5, 6, or 7 teams, 5, 6, or 7 times. You know?
and I think that was what was most disappointing about last season. It was a great season at the start, but then it faded, and then there was no follow through at all. And
Yeah,
I think that disappointed a lot of fans. And
I agree. I
you,
agree.
you know the fans in this market better than most, DJ. Like, they sour real quick when we start losing.
So, and I get that, and sometimes fans can sour too quick, but I didn't think the fans soured that much. I thought the crowds were still pretty good, and they were still into it. But to have the disappointing finish, and to lose the players they lost, and to not bring in new players who are big time, I get why people are sour. Now, if they somehow cheat death and come out on fire, you got to quit whining and just enjoy the wins. But they didn't. It's been a struggle, and they're well below the playoff line. So if you finish poorly and you lose a bunch of big players and you don't bring new players in and you start very poorly and are on pace for your worst season in 5, 6, 7 years, however it plays out, well, okay, if fans want to be a little sour, I get it. I mean, why wouldn't they be? What was in there? It's like they're not slashing ticket prices, so
Or food prices.
so a little, yeah, right, concessions, yeah. So yeah, be a little bitter, I guess. But the cool thing is, and again, in a sport where players are on 3-year deals for the most part, teams go up and teams go down really quickly. And as much as RSL fans have gotten whiplash with the roller coaster ride here in the last 12 months, I mean, last June just flying high, right? April, May, June, unbelievable, flying, right? But the Galaxy flew higher, right? RSL was third in the West, but the Galaxy were in front of them. RSL got knocked out in the playoffs. The Galaxy won it all. And now here's RSL with, depending on which week you look at the standings, 2, 3, 4 teams behind them in the standings, and one of them is the Galaxy. It's like, this is MLS and this is soccer. So complain, whine, try to hold people accountable, try to analyze what went wrong, but be aware that it can change for the good as quickly as it can change for the bad.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's the other thing. When it gets good again, there's no guarantee it's going to stay good because this is a sport where we see wild swings. And yeah, they went out early in the playoffs and it's super disappointing. But go back and look at the standings last year. 6 top teams in the league, right? 59 points or better, like RSL. 4 of them went out in the first round. Messi checked out. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. But what they did is they came back with big names and exciting team, and everyone was fired up for the Champions Cup. Right out of the gate, here we go. So that's where their paths diverge.
Yeah, they got the follow through.
Yeah, and I thought about this a lot because RSL, when you make the playoffs, it's such a low bar, and when you make the playoffs, that's the where you want to hit. That's your goal every year. It just seems to water down your team instead of if that's where you're going to try and get to, you never get any better. And I would much rather have a team that has loftier goals and if they have a season like this every once in a while, then so be it. You have to, like you say, it changes so much. Teams need to
Yeah.
rebuild and restock, and sometimes you just have an injury bug, and you've had those seasons and nothing goes right. But I think if your main focus, if you say, hey, you know what, we made the playoffs, it was a good season, that's when that's really negative approach to how you run your team.
I just think it's better to try to judge. I mean, you want to judge them on the playoffs because that's how American sports works. But you got to keep an eye on the bigger picture because teams, even if you're good, this is a sport where teams can bunker. 90 minutes is not a long time. Even a best of 3 series is not a long time. And they bunker, and it goes to penalties, and now it's potluck. And we've seen on RSL on both sides. I mean, the conference final run was great, but I'll bet Seattle thought it was pretty goofy and lucky, right? Because RSL was the team that said, hey, shut it down, don't give up a goal, get the penalties, win in advance, and they did, and they ended up in the conference final, right? but then it turns around and bites you when Minnesota and Houston knock you out on penalties. But the lesson to me is everything keeps coming down to penalties. No matter how good you are, no matter how good they are, no matter it comes down to penalties because of the way teams set up. So I'm hesitant to hang everything on the playoffs. Did you have a 50-point season? Did you have a 55-point season? Did you have a 60? Did you find a way to qualify for the Champions Cup?
All right, switching gears a little bit, DJ, over to the Leagues Cup. A lot of MLS trying to get crossover, in my opinion, trying to get crossover fans. There's a lot of Hispanic people here in the state of Utah. There's a lot of Mexican fans of the sport, and America's coming. They're one of the biggest teams in all of South America or Central America, right? In Mexico for sure. Storied club, Atlético San Luis and Querétaro are the three teams coming to America First Field. How do you feel about this? I struggle because I worry that in my stadium half the fans are cheering for the other team. I don't love that, but I'm a Utah native, so I can get it.
I would say that I get what the league's trying to do. I don't think they've gotten it right, but sometimes you have to try stuff and then improve. And I don't know what they're going to do as far as the calendar change and go into the European calendar. I think they're going to do it. For a long time, I heard right after the World Cup, now a year after the World Cup, but I do think it's coming for multiple reasons. There's multiple things that have to be solved. But maybe the Leagues Cup will fit in the calendar better than it does now. So maybe there's some hope for it. I think if you go big picture and you look for one thing they need to accomplish, nobody really took the U.S. national team that seriously for a long time. Number one, you guys may not be old enough. You certainly aren't, Tyler. I don't know, Brant. Probably not. But there was a time the U.S. couldn't even qualify for the World Cup. Nobody took it seriously. When they did qualify the first time, it was like this mystery wonder goal. Everybody heard about it, but where do you see it? There's no YouTube. The game wasn't televised. What are we doing here, right? And then, yeah, they're the host country, but it's a 24-team tournament, so the bar to get out of the group wasn't that high. Now, beating Colombia was incredible, right? But it's like, in 98, they got knocked out right away. The national team didn't really get respect in the United States until they started to beat Mexico. And beating Mexico in the 2002 World Cup was such a big deal. As someone who grew up 10 miles from the border, it was such a big deal, right? There was so much credibility because while Mexico is not awesome, okay, they're not Germany, they're not Brazil, blah, 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 right? But they usually make it out of group play. They're usually in the final 16. They're pretty good, right? There's some respect there. There's some, you may love them, you may hate them, you may tolerate them, whatever, but deep down, you got to respect them because for a long time, they've been able to go to the World Cup and get results no matter where it is. If they're hosting, if the U.S. is hosting, if it's in Asia, if it's in Europe, they get out of group play. There is something in Mexico. There's a quality there. And when the U.S. on a neutral field beat them when it mattered, that didn't bring Mexico down. That brought the U.S. up. Now, in the club scene, MLS is a new league. How do you get that respect? Well, I think the shortest path is to beat teams from Mexico that people are good, that know are good, right? And so when they're playing Cruz Azul in the Champions Cup, I think that matters. And so to create this competition, if it matters, and if there's stakes in the Champions Cup at stake, if there are places in it, if you win these games that matter, there are fans who like soccer who just don't invest that much time, energy, and money in MLS because there's so many options. There's so many international tournaments. The EPL's on TV all the time, but it's not that hard to watch games from Germany. It's not that hard to watch games from Italy. Dunny right now, if he were here, would have hit me upside the head and said, DJ, the teams in Mexico, Liga MX, they've got the best TV ratings. That's what most people watch, right? But you could still watch Argentina or Brazil or whoever. There are a lot of options. So until the clubs in the United States can beat the clubs in Mexico and win the competitions that matter, right? Vancouver, that was an awesome run, but they got beat in the final. They beat some, but they definitely turned heads, winning along the way. And Vancouver hasn't been good forever. And I mean, the White Sox, the Clippers, I don't know what sorry team, the Detroit Lions, I don't know. Maybe it's a Lions like turnaround. You're just sorry for a long time, and then all of a sudden you're so good. It's like, well, I want to make fun of the Lions. I want to make fun of the Whitecaps, but I can't. That impressed me. That was good. That was solid. So you need these competitions. And maybe it'll mean more. I don't think it'll ever mean much as Champions Cup. It does have the feel of a made up competition, but the MLS teams need to beat teams from Mexico when it matters to get attention, just like the national team did. So I get what they're going for. I don't know if this is the exact right way to do it. I do think it'll look different when they move the calendar. I think this tournament could kind of become a preseason tournament that is played in July or August, depending on, or a combination of the two, when they before they start, kick off a season with an August, mid to late August start, whatever they decide to do. So maybe that
Yeah, and
tournament will hit different then, because just stopping the season doesn't feel good. It just doesn't.
no. And there's been a lot of talk about U.S. men's team is going through what should be a golden age of players, and it's turning out to not be so much. I guess you got to check with their mom or dad to see how they're feeling. But um,
I see what you did there. Don't take sides. Yeah,
but you've got the Club World Cup going on, and it looks like Inter Miami have made it through the knockout round. They play PSG, the best team in the club team in the world at the moment, next on the 29th. And at the same time, you've got the Gold Cup going on. So there's just a proliferation of soccer in
well,
the United States. How
yeah.
can you not be excited about the fans
I mean,
showing up to watch
yeah.
whoever?
I mean, there are problems. Um, I got to say, on the whole, I like the idea of the Club World Cup for the same reason. I just think the MLS teams need a chance to step on a field and prove themselves against teams, against brands that are strong, and against clubs and teams that are actually strong right then. I mean, Manchester United is a strong brand, but if you beat them right now, But so you need both. You need to be somebody who's good and somebody who the casual fan is going to look up and go, oh, they're good. That was a good win. Um, the start times, the stadiums they've been playing in, the empty stadiums, I don't like that. I was stunned. You watch the United States and they score a goal against Haiti, right? And they're in the Cowboy Stadium there in Arlington, and they run behind the goal and they celebrate, and all the luxury suites behind the goal are empty. Guys, fill the luxury seats. I don't care. I honestly don't care how you do it, but fill those luxury suites. If you want to call the local hospital and invite the families with sick kids to come out and give them away, I got nothing to say. Do it. But there need to be bodies there. You can't be playing in an empty stadium. And that's a huge stadium. If you don't want to fill the top deck, okay, but the bottom two levels, you got to change the ticket pricing. And people have to be able to afford it, and they have to go. And playing games in the middle of the day, midweek in NFL stadiums, and you end up with empty seats and high ticket prices. I mean, who couldn't figure out this was going to happen, right? So there are problems and there are things to figure it out, but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think they need to play this thing. I think there's a little too much going on right now. I get the players and the bodies wearing down. I'm worried about injuries and players who played 50, 55. They're supposed to play 60 games. They want to protect the money-making machine, their legs. At some point, I kind of get that. So maybe the Gold Cup doesn't need to be played every 2 years. Do we really need a Gold Cup every 2 years plus Nations League? Because I don't know about you, but I don't. Gold Cup every
That's
four
probably
years.
true.
Yeah. Gold Cup every 4 years. I'm fine with that. Reduce a little of the schedule congestion here. But there are cash cash grabs all over the place, and that would just be one of them.
Yeah, I think there's issues with the U.S. men's national team, the organization, U.S. soccer, and how they haven't. It's almost like they've gotten farther away from the fans instead of getting closer
Yeah.
with the way that soccer has started to grow in the United States. But
Yeah.
at the same token, with this Club World Cup, watching those teams play, so those games are sold out, and it shows you that there are fans. They're not all coming from. They're not filling those stadiums from fans coming in from overseas. So there's still that opportunity to grow the game here. And you got to
Yep.
do that by playing these teams and letting your stadium be full with any kind of fan, Tyler.
I guess so. I mean, all are welcome. I get it. I'm on board with that.
Think how much fun it'll be if you're in a stadium that's split 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever, and your team wins.
Right.
That is a sweet feeling, right? And as
Yep.
sports fans, we've seen it happen, but how often does it happen for RSL fans? Well, MLS Cup, I mean, if you went to Seattle, right? There were a ton of LA fans there, and there are probably some neutrals there as well because of Beckham. So probably some people in Seattle just showed up and didn't really like either team, but want to watch Beckham play. You know, so
So,
Exactly.
um, last question for you, DJ. How do you wrap up and find the bright spots? You talked about the negative. We asked you about the negative and things gone wrong. How do you wrap it all up and be Pollyanna and say, hey, this is how it's going to end. It's going to be great for RSL fans if they focus on this.
we use the word end there. Sports never ends; it just goes on and on and on and on, right? But people win
This
championships talk
season.
about that. Like you win the championship, and the confetti's awesome, and the party that night is awesome, and the parade when you get back home in a couple of days is awesome. But after a week, the phone stops buzzing, the phone stops ringing, and you gotta hop on a bike and you gotta go out for a run and you gotta get in shape for the next season. So it never truly ends. I guess the reason I think things can trend up is there's still a lot. Soccer's a big puzzle, and I think they still have a lot of the right pieces in place. They have Diego Luna, they have Emeka and Ellie. Cabral ought to be good for a few more years. They got Justin Glad. I think what ails them has been too much change, and I think the Millers like stability. So I think the Millers can be, the answer to what the problem is there. It looks to me like it's coming together there. There has not been enough investment in the club in the last 6 to 12 months. You go back to when they brought in Chicho and Andres Gomez, there was real investment. Well, when there was real investment, there were real results. And I am sure, I'm not 100% sure about very many things in sports. That's why we love sports, because there's always, you never exactly know what's going to happen, right? But one of the things I'm sure about is the Millers want more premium seating. They just built a new baseball stadium. They put in more premium seating. They rebuilt the Jazz Arena less than a decade ago. They put in more premium seating. What are they going to do at America First Field? Altogether, they are going to put in more premium seating.
Yeah.
You can't sell premium seating with a subpar product. So when they lay out the roster and the payroll of all 30 teams and show the Millers, which I think they've already done, and show the Millers, here's where winning teams are paying, and this is what we're doing. Here's the investment in transfer fees and salaries for some of these elite players across MLS. Here's what we did with 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds. Well, Steve Starks has been around sports for a long time. He's going to get that very quickly. I think he's already gotten it. I think that message has been sent and received. And I think that's why he's reluctant to make a bunch of changes. And I know people think they might happen. I've been told there's some contracts in place, maybe that haven't been announced. But I really don't think it's his nature. There are two things you got to do in life. And I told my kids this, like, if things are going well, nobody really cares what your plan is because things just want things to go well. If things aren't going well, people want to know what's the plan to turn it around. And reasonable people realize, and the older we get, we all know this, it takes a while to turn things around. You didn't turn your grades around in school right away when it was going poorly, but you did eventually. You didn't get the raise at work right away. The sports team didn't win right away most of the time. But if you have a good plan, you'll get there. When you're in trouble is when there's no results and there's no plan, or the plan is obviously very bad. That's not the history with any of these people. It's not the history of the Millers when they owned the Jazz. It's not the history of Pablo coaching. And it's not Kurt's history in the front office. So I think things line up. Now, how quickly do they make it? And, it's still sports. They could spend a lot of money on a player, and the player could come here and get hurt. This season, man, there's a lot of games. We're halfway through it, and they're pretty far back. So I don't know that we'll get the immediate gratification that everyone would prefer. But we've seen it happen in this league before. The team gets hot late, and rolls into the playoffs and goes nuts. So you can't rule it out. I don't think that's going to happen. But it's really a guess until we see the quality of the player that we're bringing in, and we see how quickly the puzzle pieces, fit back together.
Well, thanks so much, DJ. We love chatting with you. We'd love to stay a little longer. We're getting late, but thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully the season will turn around and we'll all be really happy at the end of the season because things just went so great.
You know what people want in sports as much as anything? It's hope.
Hope.
Like, even if it doesn't go well enough at the end of the season, if it's trending up, and if you like the guys who came in, you think, and Pablo's always big on a training camp. Now they're going to have a training camp together, so next year can be really good. I mean, only one team can win a championship. Most of these leagues are 30, 32 teams now. So do you have is it trending?
Yeah, and we'll end with the famous saying song. It's the hope that kills you. Thanks for joining
That
us.
led to a really good scene in Ted Lasso, as you know. So we could debate that, or you can all just go watch that scene.
Yep. All right. Thanks so much, DJ.
Okay, you're welcome. Anytime.